33. Heartbreaking Christmases alone. Discover the surprising twist when my daughter-in-law arrived. Helen sat in her creaky old house, memories reliving in her mind like shadows from a distant past. For 33 Christmases, she had spent the holiday alone, residing in a space that once echoed with laughter. Now, the faded red journal lay open on her kitchen table, pages crinkled with age. Each entry a bittersweet reminder of family gatherings infused with the smell of pine and mingling voices. This time of year, the weight of solitude pressed heavily on her shoulders, as she flipped through segments of her life. The joyful stories gripped her with longing, yet brought forth the chilling pang of seeing her son, Mark, thriving in a city that felt miles away, both physically and emotionally. Her heart surged as she pondered the call she received only a week ago. Mark's voice, bright with excitement, broke through her nostalgia. He announced he was bringing home his new wife, Maria. Initially, joy blossomed within her, a fresh hope at the thought of family returning to her table. Yet soon a knot twisted in her stomach, tightening her grasp on a simmering unease. Maria seemed so glamorous, her life a contrast to Helen's humble existence. What could a retiree like her offer this radiant woman, whose beauty and refinement hinted at an extravagant upbringing? Helen's mind spiraled, questioning her worth, her place in this evolving family dynamic. Days passed slowly, each evening merging into the next, as silver snowflakes fell softly outside. She busied herself in the kitchen, her heart racing as she prepared the traditional holiday feast. Every carrot she chopped brought forth memories. Every time she rolled out the dough, her thoughts whirled, trapped in a cycle of self-doubt, battling insecurities that had festered for years. She wanted to welcome Maria but feared she would find her quaint home disappointing, overshadowed by the city lights and indulgences that Mark had embraced. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Christmas morning dawned, Helen's nerves were frayed. The table, laden with carefully wrapped gifts, felt heavy with unfulfilled promises. She left her journal open, a piece of her heart laid bare and exposed, hoping Maria would find some insight into her simple joys and quiet struggles. The doorbell's ring shattered her fevered thoughts, her heart racing with uncertainty. As she opened the door, there stood Mark in a sharp suit, and beside him, the ethereal figure of Maria, blissfully unaware of the tempest brewing in Helen's chest. The laughter that echoed during the feast danced like a wisp of smoke, intangible and fleeting. Helen stumbled, words caught in the web of her anxiety, while she fought the urge to retreat deeper into her own thoughts. Yet during a simple moment, as their hands touched while sharing pie, laughter burst forth, bridging the gulf between them. Yet behind every smile, the echo of dread loomed large, suffocating her with the weight of unresolved fears. Just as the warmth began to sink in, a sharp knock on the door interrupted everything, leaving her pulse racing with confusion and dread. What, or who, stood on the other side, ready to unravel the delicate fibers of newfound connection? Helen's breath hitched as she stood before the door, the knock echoing in the silence that had momentarily enveloped her home. The laughter from the dining room faded, replaced by an apprehensive stillness that draped itself over the occupants like a heavy fog. Her heart raced, thoughts darting wildly. Could this be the visitor from her past, or something entirely unexpected? Gathering herself, she turned to Mark and Maria. Mark's eyes mirrored the confusion she felt, while Maria's expression was a mix of curiosity and concern. It was as if they each sensed the change in atmosphere, and in that moment, the bonds they had just begun to weave felt tenuous and fragile. Taking a deep breath, Helen reached for the doorknob, her forehead glistening with uncertainty. The air crackled with tension. A part of her longed to retreat into her safe haven, to shut the door against the world. But a deeper urge compelled her to confront whatever was waiting outside. With a firm grip, she opened the door. Standing before her was a stranger within an uncertain frame. An older man, ruggedly dressed with a rugged cap shielding his weathered face. Helen's gut twisted. Memories of Christmases long past flooded her mind, the kind that sat heavy on the heart and whispered of unresolved choices. She recognized him instantly, an old friend of her late husband, someone aligned with her past, and yet entirely out of place in this new narrative of her life. "Hello, Helen," he said softly, his voice a rusted echo of shared history painted with discomfort. "I didn't expect to find you here." Caught off guard, Helen's voice stumbled as questions crowded her mind. Why was he here now, of all times? What did he want? The tension shifted closer to breaking as she perceived Mark stepping forward, a protective instinct igniting in his stance. "What do you want?" Mark asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and wariness, his presence a fortress around his mother. The man stumbled with his response, and Helen noticed the raw edge of vulnerability in his demeanor. It cracked the very foundation of her emotions as she faced the specter of her past. Could she allow this unexpected visitor to alter the course of her carefully curated Christmas? Amidst the unfolding chaos, Helen sensed a pressing need to confront her own fears and insecurities. Suddenly, the laughter from the dining room felt distant and fragmented, a reminder that she was not merely a passive participant in this narrative of new beginnings. She was at the helm, capable of shaping her destiny. "I think we need to talk," she found herself saying, surprising even her. The statement emerged raw and resolute, as if a dormant part of her had awakened, willing to face uncomfortable truths rather than shrink back into solitude. Mark glanced at Maria, who raised her brows in encouragement. They were both grounded yet imposing, and Helen's resolve began to solidify. "Why don't you both come in?" she offered, stepping aside, a decision paving the way for an unknown path ahead. It wasn't about denying her past, but rather about integrating it into the story of her present. As the man stepped over the threshold, Helen felt a surge of trepidation. Was she finally beginning to confront the skeletons that had haunted her over the years? What truths were waiting to be unveiled during this unexpected reunion? And with the door now closed behind them, the stage was set for revelations, both from the enigmatic visitor and from within herself. Yet, even as she welcomed the past into her home, Helen grasped the truth firmly. The resilience to redefine her narrative lay directly in her hands. The moment of reckoning had arrived, but what would happen next? Would she find the courage to rewrite the end of her story? Or would the shadows of 33 Christmases be too powerful to overcome? The old man stepped into the warmth of Helen's living room, a stark contrast against the chill of the evening. His presence poured an unsettling energy into the space, a blend of nostalgia and tension that clung to the air like smoke. She closed the door behind him. Note how it thudded shut as if sealing off the external world. This moment was about to redefine her understanding of family, grief, and the choices she'd made. "Can I get you a drink?" she offered, trying to create an environment where some control could be regained. It sounded rehearsed, as if she were negotiating a business deal rather than opening her home to a piece of the past. "No, thank you," he replied, waving his hand dismissively, yet the quiver in his voice exposed his discomfort. I wanted to talk." Helen nodded, turning to her children, who lingered by the dining room entrance, their expressions caught between curiosity and concern, offering silent support. Mark's eyes flicked between her and the stranger, while Maria tentatively touched her arm as if to ground her. "Maybe you should sit," Helen suggested gently, her own voice steadying as she tested the waters of this unexpected reunion. The pull of necessity compelled her to reclaim the narrative. She needed to step into this moment, to gather the scattered pieces of herself hidden beneath layers of grief. "I'm not here for anything sinister, Helen," he started, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "I was close to your husband, back in the day. I've carried a lot of guilt with me, and I need to make it right." A wave of heat rushed through Helen, igniting a firestorm of emotions. Guilt? What right did he have to bring that into her home? She opened her mouth to protest, but instead, she felt a deep ache bubble to the surface. The ache of unspoken words, of a long-buried grief that wrapped tightly around her heart. "We lost him too, you know," she said with a quiet resolve, forcing her vulnerability into the open. "You're not the only one with regrets." His eyes widened with recognition, and Helen felt an unexpected shift in their dynamic. She was no longer just a passive figure struggling against the specters of her life. She was confronting her own pain, generating ripples that could forge new pathways. "I know I didn't do enough," he continued, lowering his gaze as he unfolded an aged piece of paper from his pocket. "I've been carrying this letter for years. Your husband wrote it before everything changed. I should have delivered it." A visceral pull of curiosity gripped Helen as her heart started racing. The hope buried beneath years of silence stirred with trepidation. What could her husband have written that needed to be revealed now? Yet the raw, disapproving voice in her head warned her about using this as a means to evade her own reality. "Why now?" she questioned, narrowing her eyes on him. "Why after all this time?" "Because I've realized we can't take back our choices. We can only acknowledge them." His honesty pierced through the fog of resentment and despair. "I thought it was time for you to have this, to finish what was started." For a moment, Helen stood at the brink of the ocean, intimidated by its vastness, yet compelled to dive in. In her scheduling of the mundane, she had shielded herself from the volatile depths of her emotions for far too long. Accepting this letter could mean access to the truth she had denied herself, yet it also represented the risk of reigniting buried pain. "Why don't you just read it?" Mark challenged, stepping towards them, his protective instincts flaring. Helen's heart raced. Her fear of the unknown battled her longing for closure. In that split second, she was confronted with an opportunity not just to rediscover a piece of her past, but to redefine herself. The weight of inaction cracked under the weight of possibility. "Okay," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll read it," as she braced herself to explore what lay beneath the ink of those unspoken words. A troubling thought surfaced. Would she truly be prepared for the truths this letter contained? And could it shatter the fragile new beginnings she was only just discovering? The moment of truth loomed near, and Helen's journey of self-discovery was only beginning. Would this revelation lead her to a path of healing, or ensnare her deeper into the shadows of her past? Helen's pulse quickened as she reached for the letter, her fingers trembling ever so slightly against the paper's brittle surface. The moment hung heavy in the air, charged with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Every muscle in her body was taut, as if a single word from the old man could fracture the fragile shell of her reality. She took a breath, inhaling deeply, drawing strength from the very essence of her vulnerability. This was not merely about a letter. It represented the weight of history, the echoes of love and loss, and the unresolved questions swirling in her heart. As she unfolded the letter, the aged paper crinkled under her touch, releasing a whisper of the past. The room fell silent. Even her children held their breath as she began to read. The familiar handwriting drew her in, almost as if it could bridge the chasm of time. Each sentence felt like a pulse, a reminder of the man she had loved and lost. The words spoke of dreams, of fears, and of a profound love that had somehow remained unmarred by the chaos around them. Yet woven through his declarations were darker threads, confessions that hinted at secrets kept and decisions unmade. A labyrinth of emotions she had never fully unraveled. Helen's eyes widened as she read a passage that struck her like lightning. I fear I've become a ghost in my own life, haunted by the choices I've made. But even in this, I find hope in you. Please remember that the heart cherishes what it cannot hold. She halted, feeling the world spin on its axis. Hope? These words were a juxtaposition to the suffocating grief that had anchored her down for so long. He acknowledged his faults. His fear of being vulnerable had cost them dearly. Did this revelation grant her permission to embrace her grief without being consumed? Or did it simply reopen old wounds? With every passing second, Helen felt the tension coil tighter around her. Her children were watching, and she was acutely aware of how her reaction would shape their understanding of the past. These revelations were not just hers. They were shared, colliding with their perceptions and experiences of loss. What does it say? Mark's voice cut through the silence, revealing his protective instincts were at the forefront. He stepped closer, a steady, yet anxious presence. It's... She paused, wrestling with the weight of her emotions. The urge to shield herself and her children clashed with her desire to be honest. It's a reflection of regret. And hope. What kind of hope? Mark pressed, eyes narrowing with concern. Helen turned to face him, her resolve hardening. One that reminds us that love is complex. It can exist even amidst chaos. Maybe it's time I stop carrying this burden alone. As she spoke, a transformation began to bloom within her. A dawning realization that she had not been entirely honest with herself. All these years, she had worn grief like armor, believing it was her only identity. Yet the letter continued to unravel another path, one where healing was indeed possible. Her hands trembled as she carefully folded the letter, a tangible artifact now entwined with a plethora of emotions. She faced the old man, whose own expression reflected a deep mixture of guilt and sadness. "Thank you for bringing this to me," she finally said, the words tasting both bitter and sweet. "But this isn't just about the past. I need to reclaim my future." His eyes softened, a glimmer of understanding passing between them. In that moment, Helen felt an undeniable strength rise within her. Perhaps this was not merely a confrontation with the past, but a stepping stone towards embracing a more authentic version of herself. One that recognized the pain, but also cherished the capacity to move ahead. As she turned to her children, she felt something shift, a bridge forming between the past and the potential of the future. It was time to let them in, to share the complexities of grief, love, and healing. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, an unexpected knock at the door shattered the moment, thrusting her into another layer of uncertainty. Who could it be now? And would this visitor complicate her newfound determination? Or would it provide the clarity needed to continue her journey? The unexpected knock echoed through the silence, jolting Helen from the tender moment she'd begun to build with her children. It was a sound that struck with urgent insistence, and she caught the apprehensive exchange of glances with Mark and the younger ones. Their expressions mirrored her internal turmoil, a sudden disruption at the doorway to her new resolve. She approached the door carefully, each step weighted with anticipation. Who could it possibly be? A surge of doubt coiled tightly in her stomach. Perhaps it was an old friend, or worse, an acquaintance bearing news she was not ready to hear. Drawing a steadying breath, she opened the door to reveal a figure she had not expected. Sylvie, the daughter-in-law she barely knew. Her presence ignited a fresh wave of complexity within Helen's heart. "Hi, Helen," Sylvie said, her voice unwavering yet soft, as if she'd been rehearsing the words just for this moment. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Helen stood frozen for a moment, caught between the weight of the letter and her instinct to retreat into her familiar shell. But Sylvie's expression was earnest, and there was a determination that seemed to beckon Helen forward. Finally, Helen shook her head, forcing herself to respond. "No, not at all. Come in." As Sylvie entered, Helen closed the door behind them, feeling the shift in energy. Mark and the others remained watching, curiosity piqued by this unexpected intrusion. Helen gestured to Sylvie to take a seat, her heart racing with uncertainty. Why had she come now? The questions hovered between them like a tangible barrier. "I wanted to talk to you about something," Sylvie began, hesitating as her eyes darted toward Mark, who stood protectively by, arms folded. The room was charged with an atmosphere that felt both intimate and precarious. Helen couldn't dismiss the instinctual urge to protect her family. "What's on your mind?" She prodded gently, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. "I've been thinking a lot about the past," Sylvie said slowly, her gaze flickering with vulnerability. "About family, traditions, and loss. I feel like there are pieces of history that we've brushed aside, and I want to understand." The openness in Sylvie's admission struck a chord within Helen. It had taken her years to summon the courage to embrace her past, but here was someone, yearning to connect, reaching out to bridge the chasms that grief had carved. Her heart felt heavy with recognition and empathy. "I know that loss can be an overwhelming burden," Helen said, her voice laced with raw honesty. "But it's easy to let it define us. I've lived in the shadows of my own grief for too long." "I get that, truly," Sylvie replied, tilting her head slightly, as if weighing Helen's words. "But what if we could change how those shadows shape our future? Maybe there's a way to reclaim what we've lost, together." Helen paused, contemplating the implications of Sylvie's words. An idea began to unfurl within her, a vision of connection that previously felt too distant. "What do you mean by reclaim?" "Let's bring life back to those traditions. Reconnect with the past, while creating new memories," Sylvie suggested, a glimmer of hope lighting her eyes. "Start a new family tradition that honors what we've lost, and celebrates what we have." With each word, Helen felt an uncoiling, as though years of tension were dissipating. The prospect of weaving together their shared histories was intimidating, yet exhilarating. Sylvie's courage ignited something within Helen, pushing her to confront her own fears head-on. "I'd like that," Helen said, her voice stronger, clearer now. "Perhaps this can be our way of acknowledging the past while also moving forward. I want my children to feel connected, not just to loss, but to love." Mark's eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of understanding passing between him and his wife. Just when Helen felt the dawning of a new path illuminating before her, the air shifted once more. The knock at the door had not only ushered in Sylvie but also new possibilities. Would they be able to entwine their lives in a way that honored both grief and hope? The remnants of her husband's letter echoed in her mind, promising strength in vulnerability, and she now held the key to whether they would unlock that door together. As she looked toward Sylvie, anticipation and fear mingling in her veins, Helen realized that her journey was far from over. The knock had marked a beginning rather than a diversion, but another approach lay waiting just outside her window. A challenge, perhaps. One that could either fortify her bonds or plummet her deep into uncertainty once again. With her heart racing, she prepared to ask Sylvie about what lay ahead. Would they be able to navigate this new terrain together? Or was the past too convoluted to rebuild from? Helen's determination began to crystallize as Sylvie's proposal settled in her mind. The idea of reviving forgotten traditions and integrating them with fresh memories felt like a lifeline, offering growth rather than simply accepting the remnants of old grief. She couldn't shake the apprehension about what this process might demand from her, both emotionally and mentally. But the glimmer of hope urged her on. Reclaiming traditions, Helen repeated, testing the phrase on her tongue. It felt bold and challenging. Each word conjured images of holiday dinners and laughter echoing through the halls, fragments of a past she had buried. What kind of traditions did you have in mind? Sylvie shifted in her seat, enthusiasm bubbling beneath her composed exterior. We could start with something simple. Maybe begin on holidays. I grew up with a special Christmas dinner and a tradition of sharing memories around the table. It could be a space where everyone feels included, sharing stories about family members we've lost, making it joyful and bittersweet at the same time. Helen's breath hitched. The prospect stirred not only nostalgia but also fear. What if speaking of the past only reopened wounds instead of healing them? Would they drown in sorrow rather than bask in the warmth of shared memories? Yet the emotional detox that Sylvie was suggesting felt necessary. It was a confrontation with their loss rather than avoidance. I want to share memories, Helen murmured, her thoughts colliding with her feelings. But how do we do it without sinking into sadness? That's the beauty of it, Sylvie said, compassion radiating from her words. It's about balance. We honor the memories but also embrace what's right in front of us now. The joy and the love within the family today. As they spoke, Helen's imagination began crafting an outline of what was possible. She could picture candles lighting the table, laughter and storytelling including the children, perhaps even inviting old family friends. But in her mind, certain figures floated eerily. Would her husband's absence hang heavily over the gatherings, transformed from a source of sorrow into a focal point of remembrance and gratitude? I'd never thought of it that way, Helen admitted, feeling vulnerability in admitting the complexity of her feelings. I suppose carrying forward the love is also a way to keep their spirits alive. A flicker of understanding passed between them as Sylvie nodded enthusiastically. Exactly! It's about creating a legacy. We don't have to erase the past. We can adapt it and make it ours. Slowly, Helen found herself on the precipice of something extraordinary. But beneath the surface, fear wove its intricate web within her thoughts. Could she truly navigate this new reality without losing herself again? What if these new memories still carried the haunting echoes of what had been? Mark, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. What can I do to help? The question was simple, but it spoke volumes about his willingness to engage, to be there for Helen in this journey they were about to embark upon. Maybe you can help us brainstorm ideas, Helen replied, the current of uncertainty in her veins transforming into a tentative resolve. Creating a shared activity might ease the transition. With their family involvement put forward, Helen felt tentative excitement. The wave flourishing in her chest began to replace the weight of her grief. As she contemplated the possibilities, a thrilling concoction of fear and anticipation washed over her. It was a daunting venture, yet Helen knew the return to traditions could also mean the reclamation of her own identity. Just then, an unforeseen thought crossed her mind. What if we create a family scrapbook? A place to gather everyone's cherished memories and share them as they arise. The idea surprised her, but it felt right. A living document of their interconnected stories. Sylvie's eyes sparkled with encouragement. I love that. It'll be a beautiful, ongoing project that everyone can contribute to. There'll be room for our stories about love, loss, and laughter. In that moment, Helen recognized the profound change within herself. She was no longer merely reacting to grief. She was actively shaping her narrative. Yet a shadow loomed over her thoughts. She needed to confront not only familial loss, but also her own repressed emotions that wrestled with acceptance and forgiveness. As their conversation continued, Helen felt fortified by the potential of what lay ahead. But alongside the anticipation, dread began churning in the depth of her mind. The awareness that embracing this journey meant she had to confront painful truths that had long been buried. What if the process forced her to face not only her grief, but unresolved issues with the past that she had avoided for too long? Would she find the clarity she sought? Or would those shadows that lingered in her heart emerge, demanding acknowledgement? The answer hung tantalizingly in the air, just out of reach, leaving Helen staring into the future with both excitement and trepidation. The next phase of her life, unmarked by certainty, awaited her determination to press forward, no matter the cost. The early morning light filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow across the table piled with papers and craft supplies. Helen sat with a notebook open before her, the words, "Family Scrapbook Project," sprawling across the top page. What had begun as an idea had suddenly ballooned into an opportunity, a canvas upon which she could paint the rich, intricate layers of her family's history. Yet every stroke of her pen felt heavy, laden with weighty memories. She scribbled down potential themes, memorable holidays, Aunt Sadie's legendary pumpkin pie, and first steps. Each entry was a breadcrumb that led to laughter and love, but it also led her deeper into the labyrinth of her grief. She stilled her hand, staring at the list, anxiety creeping beneath her skin. Would the celebration of memories only highlight the absence of those she had lost? "Focus, Helen," she whispered to herself, pulling her thoughts back from the spiral. In reclaiming the past, she had a chance to reframe her narrative. This process was about healing and acceptance, not just memories. It involved bonds, connections, and the act of creating together. Rising from the table, Helen decided to ground herself in the mundane before diving deeper. She walked onto the porch, welcoming the brisk reprieve of fresh air. Autumn leaves crunched underfoot, and the scent of damp earth filled the air, reminders that transitions were natural. But what of the emotional transitions she was facing? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She had buried her emotions, convinced that pushing them aside would offer solace. Yet Sylvie's words echoed in her mind. We honor the memories, but also embrace what's right in front of us. It was a call to integrate her past with her present. She could do this. The scrapbook was more than just a collection of images. It was a tangible step toward weaving her family's narrative into something vibrant rather than sorrowful. As she moved back inside, Helen spotted Mark gathering supplies for the project. His figure, bent over an array of glue sticks and glitter pens, struck a chord within her. Here was her partner, willing to walk this journey beside her, a solid anchor in the stormy sea of emotions she was navigating. "Hey, do you think we should add sections for each family member, like a page for Grandma's favorite memories or Dad's silly jokes?" she asked, feeling a spark of hope as she engaged him in conversation. Mark looked up, a smile breaking across his face. "I think that's a great idea. Why don't we include spaces for each of us to add in our favorite memories? It would show how interconnected we are." The initial apprehension in Helen's chest began to lift, replaced by excitement. Here was a way to invite joy into the sorrow. A way for the family to share and relive, not just to remember. It felt cathartic, as if they were actively pulling together the fragments of their lives to create something meaningful, sifting through the cloud of grief and emerging like blossoms in spring. Her focus shifted as she drafted a plan. This project could open doors for conversations they had long avoided. It could be an invitation for each family member to contribute, which might, in turn, encourage deeper discussions about loss, joy, and everything in between. She glanced toward the doorway where her daughter stood, eyes wide with curiosity. "What are you two up to?" she asked, stepping into the room. "Building a family scrapbook. Want to join in?" Helen replied, feeling the warmth of her daughter taking a place beside her at the table. The spark of collective enthusiasm ignited within them as they began brainstorming. But with each idea shared, Helen felt the weight of vulnerability press firmly against her chest again. What if the memories uncovered wounds too tender to touch? What if her daughter stumbled upon her own unresolved feelings during these discussions? And yet, another thought loomed larger. A realization that the very act of creating this scrapbook could also lead to conversations that grew space for healing within their family. They might find strength within those conversations. Surviving the waves of memory could propel them into new depth of understanding, acceptance, and love. But as Helen faced this monumental step forward, a nagging voice in her head whispered of unfinished business. She needed to confront her past, both the sweet and the bitter, not just for her family, but for herself as well. She felt a foreshadowing of discomfort, as if the deeper she dove into the scrapbook, the more she might have to confront the emotions picking at her heartstrings. As she picked up a glitter pen, contemplating the first words she'd ink on the page, a flash of fear surged through her. What lurked beneath the surface? Could she truly embrace this journey of vulnerability? The silence in the room thickened as she considered the enormity of what lay ahead. Would she finally face what she had long avoided? Or would the echoes of unresolved emotions be too powerful to silence? With the scrapbook unfurling before them and her daughter's eager eyes gazing back, Helen realized she stood at a threshold, teetering between past and present. A choice that would determine how she would navigate her future. And just as she was about to write the first word, an unexpected knock at the door seized her attention. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears. Who could it be, interrupting this moment of tentative clarity? Would they help, or threaten to unravel the fragile steps she had just begun to forge? Helen stood frozen, the glitter pen hovering just above the white page, unsure of what to do next. The knock echoed through the silence, a jarring reminder that life outside their intimate moment continued unabated. Fear clutched at her heart. Was it a well-meaning neighbor? Or someone who could disrupt the fragile gathering of emotional strength they had begun to forge? "Do you want me to get it?" Mark asked, sensing her hesitation. "No, I'll go," Helen replied, forcing her voice to steady. She needed to confront whatever waited beyond the door, perhaps as much as she needed to face the truths she was hiding from within. Each step toward the front door felt like wading through thick mud, anxiety rising with every footfall. She cracked open the door, half expecting to find an unwelcome visitor, but instead was met with the familiar face of her estranged sister, Claire. "Helen," Claire said, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and vulnerability. Helen's breath caught in her throat. They hadn't spoken in months, each conversation laden with unhealed grievances and unresolved tension. Claire's unexpected arrival felt like an intrusion, yet there was something in her demeanor, a softening of once sharp edges, that sparked a flicker of hope. "What are you doing here?" Helen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I was in the neighborhood and thought I should stop by," Claire replied, shifting on her feet as if she were weighing her next words. "I've been thinking about us, about Mom, about everything." Helen's heart raced. Should she let this moment slip away in unease, or stand firm and confront their fraught history? The scrapbook project loomed in the back of her mind like an unfinished puzzle missing its pieces. Perhaps this unexpected visit was the very opportunity she needed to address some of those missing parts. "Come in," she finally said, stepping aside and letting Claire enter the home they once shared laughter within. A rush of nostalgia flooded her senses, and Helen couldn't ignore the inevitable question creeping into the forefront of her thoughts. Could they begin to repair the chasm that had divided them? As Claire settled into a chair at the kitchen table, Helen couldn't shake the tension that encased the room. The remnants of their previous conflicts hovered like ghosts waiting to be acknowledged or exorcised. Her mind raced, picturing pages of their shared history, filled with cherished memories and scarred moments begging for a voice. "Mark and I are trying to create a family scrapbook," Helen finally said, her words feeling heavy, yet liberating. "It's meant to celebrate our memories, the good and the bad." Claire's gaze softened, and she leaned in, as if invitation carried power. "What if we could work on it together?" Helen's heart thudded with a mixture of excitement and dread. A collaborative effort could peel back layers of pain and reveal understanding. But could she trust the process? The thought of facing those unresolved emotions with Claire sent a shiver of uncertainty through her. "What do you think is worth remembering, Claire?" Helen asked, veering toward the deep end too quickly, yet unable to resist the current pulling her in. "A lot," Claire replied, hesitating. "But we've also built a lot of walls. Maybe it's time to tear them down." Time felt suspended as Helen absorbed the weight of those words. Was this a moment of reconciliation? An opening of hearts? Underneath the surface, she recognized a growing determination to address the things they had put off for too long. Paining though it might be, addressing the past could illuminate a path forward. Claire's voice started to shake as she hesitated again, weighing her next words like precious stones. "I've missed you, Helen. And I've missed Mom." The floodgates of emotion threatened to burst open. Could they confront the echoes of their history together? Not as estranged sisters, but as women eager to reclaim their familial bond. Helen felt her gut twist at the prospect of truth surfacing in those sacred pages. There could be pain in revisiting their memories, but it might also yield a new narrative where they emerged unbroken. "Let's start with a page about her," Helen decided, hoping this would set the tone for healing. Her recipes, her stories, her spirit. As her sister nodded, a sigh releasing the tension in her shoulders, Helen felt the weight of those unvoiced thoughts beginning to lift. She took her place at the table, pulling the notebook toward both of them. In the act of creation, perhaps they would find the strength to confront their individual and collective grief. Perhaps the act of engaging with their memories would serve not only as a connection to their mother, but would also weave an invisible thread of understanding between them. And as they began to share stories, laughter mingling with tears, the door to their past creaked open wider, revealing a lingering question lurking in the shadows. What else would they uncover together? And at what cost? As Helen sat across from Claire, the family scrapbook lay open between them, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. Old scrapbooks were relics of childhood, brimming with childhood collages of shared laughter and adventures. Yet now they felt bittersweet. Reminders of lost time and unresolved issues. "Do you remember the Christmas Mom made a gingerbread house?" Claire asked, her voice rich with nostalgia. "It fell apart right when we brought it out to the living room, and we both just laughed." Helen chuckled, memories flooding her mind. She could picture their mother, her hands dusted with flour, eyeing the crumbling gingerbread in mock horror, before erupting into laughter along with her two daughters. "I remember," Helen replied, her chest tightening as the warmth of that moment seeped into her heart. "She just didn't care, did she? It was all about the fun." "Right," Claire responded, her tone shifting slightly, an undercurrent beneath her words. "But maybe if we focus on the good, we risk ignoring the bad." Helen's heart sank. The undercurrent of criticism in Claire's voice felt like a wave threatening to drown them both. "What do you mean?" she asked, maintaining a calm exterior while her insides churned. "Maybe we should also address why we stopped celebrating those moments. Why it became a painful memory instead of a joyful one," Claire suggested, her expression growing more serious. Helen contemplated this, grappling with the instinctive urge to shield herself. Did she truly want to peel back those layers? The memories surrounding Christmas had turned from cherished festivities into reminders of their mother's absence, a wound that never fully healed. We could start with the last Christmas we spent together. Helen began, her voice trailing off as the painful memory resurfaced. I'd rather not relive that, Claire retorted, a spark of defensiveness in her eyes. But if we're going to do this, we need to be honest. It felt like a challenge hovering above them. Would they be mired in the past, rehashing grievances, or break free into a broader spectrum of healing? Helen shifted in her seat, searching for the right words while grappling with an unexpected emotion stirring within her. Fear. What if honesty drags us down instead of lifting us up? Helen questioned. Her voice wavered, but within her a newfound resolve pushed through her trepidation. This was, after all, the first real chance they had to bridge the gap between them. Or it might set us free, Claire shot back, the edge in her voice tempered by hope. What if we finally moved past it? The truth of those words resonated within Helen, igniting her determination. They had been trapped for too long in a cycle of hurt and misunderstanding. This was a crossroads, a point of divergence where they could either spiral deeper into conflict or forge a new path of reconciliation. As they began to sift through old photographs, the stories unfolded, some fractured, some bittersweet. Helen realized that she could choose to embrace the painful chapters without succumbing to them. She could redefine the narrative. In this collaborative act, beyond just a scrapbook, she began to see the scaffolding of their shared resilience. With every shared story and each photograph added, an overwhelming sense of belonging formed, a bond that could lead to healing instead of estrangement. Yet amidst the echoes of laughter, Helen sensed an unease lurking beneath. Their mother's absence always loomed large over their memories, shaping both their perspectives, every unspoken resentment teetering on the edge of release. What if there's more to unearth? Helen mused aloud, meeting Claire's gaze with fortitude. Maybe it's time we ask ourselves what this really means. Claire nodded, the intensity building between them, yet vulnerability tethered their resolve. Together, we might discover something unexpected. And as they both delved into the recesses of their memories, piecing together fragments long left buried, there was an all-encompassing question gnawing at them, echoed in Helen's heart. Would their exploration expose wounds too raw, or reveal a deeper understanding waiting just beneath the surface? As the afternoon light waned, Helen and Claire pored over the scrapbook, the once blank pages gradually filling with memories of their mother's warmth and love. Each photo reverberated with laughter, but also echoed the unresolved pain that had shadowed their relationship for far too long. Helen felt a unique shift as they shared stories, akin to peeling back layers of old paint to reveal a vibrant undercoat. I think we should add a page about how we spent that last Christmas, Claire suggested tentatively, her gaze dropping to the table. You know, the one where everything seemed to fall apart. Helen's breath hitched. That Christmas lingered as one of the heaviest memories, a testament to their mother's declining health and fragile family dynamics. Yet it now bore the potential for healing. Perhaps we can reframe it, she offered, her voice steadier than she felt. Instead of viewing it solely as a painful memory, let's acknowledge how we tried to hold on to the traditions, even as everything was changing. A spark of understanding ignited in Claire's eyes. Yes. Maybe we can capture how we fought through it all, how we kept those traditions alive despite the circumstances. As they began to capture that night, the chaotic kitchen filled with laughter and the aroma of their mother's cooking, the efforts made even when spirits were low, the walls built through seasons of distance started to crumble. Helen felt a twinge of empowerment. Honoring their past while adapting it for the future transformed something heavy into a testament of resilience, proof that their bond could withstand the test of pain. With every story shared, they delved deeper into their emotions, dismantling the barriers that had divided them. Claire recounted how their mother had fought through the laughter and the tears, watching as Helen decorated the tree with ornaments passed down through generations. "I was scared, you know," Claire admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared we would lose the connections we had. The honesty felt like a breath of fresh air." "I was scared too," Helen confessed. "That we wouldn't have the courage to navigate through the grief together." The admission felt liberating, peeling away years of unspoken fears. What if vulnerability could indeed be a bridge rather than a burden? In that moment, Helen realized that she no longer needed to carry the past alone. By reaching out, they'd created a tapestry of shared grief that began to blend into the colorful fabric of hope. This recognition marked a pivotal shift for Helen. She was actively engaging in her healing, rather than shielding herself through silence. As the evening wore on, the two sisters found themselves lost in collaboration, laughter mingling with the static of occasional tears. The scrapbook had become a symbol, not only of their family's legacy, but a vessel for exploring the complexities of their relationship. "Let's create a section dedicated to new traditions we can start," Helen suggested as they placed a photo of their mother next to a sketch of hands breaking bread. "One that honors what we've lost, and what we still have to cherish." Claire nodded in agreement, her eyes shimmering with the glow of newfound connection. "We can brainstorm our favorite recipes, or things we used to do as kids. Let's make it something joyful." The transition felt like a rebirth for both women, an affirmation that despite their heavy history, they could craft a future illuminated by love and understanding. As the last light of the day dimmed, Helen closed the scrapbook, a satisfied smile gracing her lips. This was not just a project. It was a proclamation of their shared journey ahead, one they would face together. They'd transformed the narrative from one of loss into one overflowing with warmth and laughter, ready to invite in the complexities that life would inevitably bring. Facing her sister, Helen felt a solid confidence take root within her. No longer just the quiet retiree quietly navigating the shadows of her life, but a woman firmly anchored and embracing her past while stepping into a future she was excited to chart. The resilience she had longed for had sparked like a flame, giving light to the possibilities that lay ahead. As they prepared to engage their family in this new creation, Helen felt a wave of certainty wash over her. She had conquered her fears and transformed her solitude into connection. Not just memories revisited, but a legacy reborn. The past, once a heavy anchor, now served as a sturdy foundation supporting their new beginnings. With the scrapbook nestled on the table, Helen embraced the moment. She had taken essential steps toward not just healing herself, but also nurturing the relationships that mattered most. The journey was no longer anchored in grief, but blossoming in vibrant possibilities. In that exact moment of realization, Helen decided to reach out. She would call Mark, Maria, and even Sylvie, and share their new tradition, inviting them to join in crafting the connections that would redefine her family's legacy. And with that decision lit within her heart, she found an exhilarating thrill in her chest, an affirmation of her journey forward, a commitment to fostering love while honoring their shared memories. Now was the time to seize the opportunity. Would they create this legacy together? You need to subscribe now. Don't miss the next exclusive and transformative stories. If you're inspired by Helen's journey, leave a like to fuel the algorithm and help others discover it. Comment below with your thoughts and how you plan to embrace your own family traditions. We want to hear your stories. And don't wait. Even one more second to share this journey with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of reconnecting and healing.